How to never let irritation take over again. Imagine having such strong control over your emotions that nothing and no one can get under your skin. Criticism, challenges, and even provocations simply stop affecting your balance. Sounds impossible? The truth is, many people have already reached this level of emotional mastery. While most people react impulsively at the slightest provocation, some have developed a powerful skill, the ability to stay calm no matter what. And the best part? You can learn to do the same. Today, I'm going to show you how to stop getting irritated by anyone, ever again. Not because the world around you will change, but because you will change the way you respond to it. Before we dive in, head to the comments and type, "Today, I begin my best version. I choose to take control of my emotions." By doing this, you're making a real commitment to a more balanced and mindful life. Now, let's get straight to it. The silent danger of anger, and how to control it before it controls you. Anger is one of the most destructive emotions a person can experience. It often starts with something small, a harsh word, an unfair situation, a mistake that affects us. But if left unchecked, it spreads like wildfire, consuming our mental clarity and pushing us toward impulsive actions we'll almost certainly regret. Most people believe that anger is a sign of strength, that reacting with fury commands respect, but the truth is quite the opposite. Uncontrolled anger isn't power, it's weakness. It shows that we're prisoners of our emotions, unable to master our own minds. How many times have you said or done something in the heat of the moment, only to regret it later? That's the danger of anger. It clouds our judgment, turns us into hostages of our circumstances, and drives us to make decisions we'd give anything to undo. The devastating effects of anger. Beyond emotional damage, anger has a direct impact on our health. Scientific research confirms that it raises blood pressure, weakens the immune system, and can even trigger heart problems. In other words, the more time you spend fueling feelings of rage, the more your body pays the price. But the damage doesn't stop there. Anger also erodes relationships. How many friendships have been destroyed by words spoken without thinking? How many marriages have ended because of heated arguments? A single moment of uncontrolled fury can have irreversible consequences, and if that wasn't enough, anger also makes us easy targets for manipulation. People who know how to push our buttons can make us lose control effortlessly. When someone has power over your anger, they have power over you. How to master anger before it masters you. The key to not being consumed by anger is learning to recognize it the moment it starts to surface. Too often, we only realize we're angry when we're already in the middle of a conflict. But anger doesn't come out of nowhere. It begins with subtle signs: tension in the chest, a clenched jaw, repetitive thoughts about something that upset us. When these signals appear, it's time to act. Take a deep breath, step away, reassess the situation. It sounds simple, but it works. A few seconds of pause can be the difference between staying in control and regretting your actions later. Another crucial step is changing the way we interpret the events around us. A provocation only affects you if you allow it to. An insult only has power if you give it meaning. Instead of reacting automatically, ask yourself, does this really deserve my attention? Most of the things that anger us are insignificant in the long run. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first instinct might be to honk, yell, or retaliate. But will this moment, this few seconds, matter to you a year from now? Probably not. So why let it steal your peace now? Turning anger into self-control. Mastering anger doesn't mean ignoring it. It means using it to your advantage. Instead of letting it consume you, channel it into something that improves your life. If something deeply upsets you, take it as a sign that there's something inside you that needs work. Truly strong people aren't the ones who explode easily. They're the ones who remain unshaken in the face of adversity. Controlling your emotions isn't weakness, it's freedom. So next time you feel anger rising, remember, you have the power to choose how to respond. Choose calm. Choose wisdom. Choose not to be a slave to your emotions. The real reason behind your suffering and how to break free from the expectations holding you back. Negative emotions don't come from what happens to us. They come from the expectations we create. Every time we feel frustrated, angry, sad, or resentful, the real cause isn't the event itself, but the gap between reality and what we thought would happen. We expect people to behave a certain way, for things to go according to plan, for life to reward our efforts. But the world doesn't work like that. It doesn't follow our rules. And when reality doesn't align with our expectations, we suffer. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "This shouldn't have happened to me," or "That person had no right to treat me like that"? These thoughts are the root of your suffering. We believe we are owed certain things, recognition, respect, fairness, but we forget that others don't see the world the same way we do. It's not what happens that hurts us, it's how we interpret it. And more often than not, our interpretation is distorted by unrealistic expectations. The illusion of expectations and self-inflicted suffering. Imagine someone who believes their relationship will last forever, that their partner will never betray or disappoint them. They build this expectation based on their own worldview. But if betrayal happens, the pain doesn't just come from the act itself, it comes from the brutal clash between reality and the illusion they created. Or take another example. A person who assumes their friends will always be there for them. When one of them can't show up during an important moment, they feel betrayed. But is the friend really at fault? Or was the problem the rigid expectation they had in the first place? The same pattern applies to nearly everything in life. If we expect traffic to always be smooth, we get frustrated when we hit a jam. If we believe our boss should acknowledge our hard work, we feel disappointed when they don't. If we assume people should always treat us kindly, we become furious when someone is rude. The problem was never the traffic, the boss, or the rude stranger. The problem was the expectation we created. The solution: accept reality as it is. This doesn't mean giving up on goals or settling for less. It means shifting your mindset. Instead of expecting the world to conform to your desires, prepare yourself for any outcome. The philosopher Epictetus said we should accept everything as if we had chosen it, because resisting reality only leads to suffering. Think about it. When something unexpected happens, you have two choices: resist and suffer, or accept and learn. Let's say you worked hard for a promotion, but they gave it to someone else. You could get bitter, hold on to resentment, and let it poison you. Or you could accept the decision, analyze what led to it, and adjust your strategy for the future. Acceptance isn't weakness. In fact, it's a sign of strength. It means you are no longer a prisoner of your circumstances. How to let go of expectations and find inner peace. Reflect on your expectations. Whenever you feel frustrated or upset, ask yourself, what was I expecting? Was this expectation even realistic? More often than not, you'll realize you were demanding something that was never in your control. Adopt a flexible mindset. Instead of creating rigid rules for how people in the world should behave, develop a more open perspective. Things rarely go exactly as planned, and that's okay. Practice gratitude for what is, not what should have been. Instead of focusing on what didn't happen, appreciate what's right in front of you. Even in tough times, there's always something to learn, something to grow from. Remember that no one owes you anything. This may sound harsh, but it's actually freeing. The world isn't here to meet your expectations. The sooner you accept that, the freer you'll be. Turn obstacles into lessons. If something didn't go your way, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Instead of complaining, use the experience to grow stronger. Real peace doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from learning to move with it, without letting your emotions be held hostage by unrealistic expectations. Happiness isn't about shaping reality to fit your desires. It's about navigating life's unpredictability without losing your inner balance. True freedom begins when you let go of expectations and embrace life as it is. The real reason behind your anger, and how to break free from your ego's control. Anger doesn't come from what others do. It comes from the meaning we attach to their actions. More often than not, rage is nothing more than a reflection of a wounded ego. When we feel disrespected, ignored, or treated unfairly, we react with fury because we see it as an attack on our identity. But is the real problem the other person? Or is it how we perceive ourselves? Our ego craves recognition, wants to feel valued, and refuses to be questioned. And this constant need for validation is what keeps us trapped in anger. If someone ignores us, we feel dismissed. If someone contradicts us, we feel like our intelligence is being challenged. If someone is rude, we take it as a personal attack. But do these actions really say anything about us? Or do they reflect more about the other person? The truth is, most of the time, people's behavior has nothing to do with us. Yet our ego makes us believe that everything revolves around us. The ego and the illusion of control. One of the ego's biggest traps is the belief that we have control over how others treat us. We want respect, recognition, and appreciation. But the world doesn't follow our rules. If you constantly expect people to behave a certain way, you will inevitably be frustrated, because everyone sees the world through their own lens. That's why Marcus Aurelius said, "We are not disturbed by what happens to us, but by our thoughts about what happens." If someone insults you, the insult itself has no power. It only affects you if you allow it to. You can choose to ignore it, see it as a reflection of that person, and move on, without letting it disturb your peace. But the ego wants to fight. It wants to prove it's right. It wants to defend itself. And in this desperate need to protect its image, it drags you into anger's trap. You lose control, react impulsively, and, in the end, the only person who truly suffers is you. If an insult doesn't change who you are, if rudeness doesn't define your worth, then why let it shake you? How your ego feeds your anger. In traffic, someone cuts you off and your ego takes it as a personal attack. But did that driver really do it on purpose? Or were they just distracted? Either way, you feel the need to react. At work, your boss criticizes your project, and you feel unappreciated, as if your entire competence is being questioned. But was it really a personal attack, or just normal feedback? In relationships, someone doesn't reply to your message right away and you feel ignored. But did they actually mean to disrespect you, or were they just busy? The ego constantly seeks validation, and when it doesn't get it, it responds with anger. But what if, instead of reacting impulsively, we started seeing situations for what they really are? What if we stopped interpreting everything as a personal attack? How to control anger and free yourself from your ego. Recognize your ego's role in your anger. Whenever you feel angry, ask yourself, why does this bother me? More often than not, the answer will be, because I wanted to be treated differently. Stop personalizing other people's actions. People's behavior isn't about you, it's about them. If someone is rude, it reflects their mindset, not your worth. Learn to laugh at your own ego. Sometimes, we take things way too seriously. Try looking at your reactions with humor and ask yourself, does this really matter that much? Focus on what you can control. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. Your inner peace depends on your ability to not let other people's behavior dictate your emotions. Practice strategic indifference. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every criticism needs to be taken personally. Choose where to invest your energy. The best response to those trying to provoke you. Seneca said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." If someone treats you with hostility and you respond with anger, you've become just like them. But if you stay calm and refuse to let them affect you, you demonstrate real strength. Anger is a reflection of an ego that hasn't yet learned to detach from other people's opinions. But when you realize that others don't have the power to define you, you become free. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or injustice. It means learning to respond with wisdom, not impulse. Inner peace doesn't come from trying to change others. It comes from controlling how you react to them. When your ego stops being the center of your existence, anger loses its power over you. The ego trap and the illusion of revenge. The ego tells us that if we forgive, we are showing weakness, that if we let go of anger, we are letting the person who hurt us go unpunished. But that's a dangerous illusion. In reality, the best revenge isn't retaliation, it's indifference. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. If someone betrays us, humiliates us, or wrongs us, holding on to resentment only extends their control over us. As long as we are consumed by anger, we remain prisoners of the past. Forgiveness, on the other hand, puts the power back in our hands. It allows us to release that weight and move forward without letting the past define us." How anger keeps us trapped in the past. Resentment is like a fire we keep feeding. Every time we think about what happened, we reignite the flames and relive the pain. But does it really make sense to carry something forever that no longer exists? Should our peace depend on someone else's actions? Epictetus reminded us that we cannot control what others do, only how we respond. If someone insults us, it's not the insult itself that hurts, it's the meaning we attach to it. Similarly, if someone betrays us, what truly wounds us is not the act itself, but our inability to let go of the pain. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it stops us from living in it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's freeing yourself. Many people resist forgiveness because they believe it means accepting or excusing what happened. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Forgiving doesn't mean trusting someone again. It doesn't mean welcoming them back into your life. It simply means no longer allowing that situation to control your emotions. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. Inner peace isn't about waiting for an apology. It's about deciding that your happiness doesn't depend on someone else's actions. How to practice forgiveness and find peace. Recognize that resentment doesn't punish them. It punishes you. The person who hurt you may have already moved on, but as long as you hold on to anger, you remain stuck in that moment. Accept that the past cannot be changed. Replaying the pain won't undo what happened, but it can prevent you from enjoying the present and building a better future. Understand that forgiveness is a process. It doesn't mean you have to just let it go overnight. It means working on releasing that burden, little by little. Shift your perspective. Try to see the situation differently. Maybe that person acted out of ignorance, fear, or weakness. Maybe they didn't know any better at the time. Choose emotional freedom. Holding on to anger gives others power over your peace. Choosing to forgive means reclaiming that power and deciding that your happiness isn't determined by their actions. The best revenge is indifference. We often think the best way to respond to an offense is through retaliation, but that only keeps us at the same level as the person who hurt us. The real victory is proving that their actions didn't change us, that we moved on, that we refused to let someone else's behavior steal our peace. Seneca said, "When we give in to anger, we lose control of ourselves." So if someone tried to hurt you, the best response isn't revenge, it's indifference. It's showing that you have become even stronger, even freer. Forgiveness is about letting go of anger and embracing serenity, not for them, but for you. The power of non-reaction. How to master your emotions and avoid unnecessary conflicts. When something upsets us, our first instinct is almost always impulsive. We feel the need to defend ourselves, to respond in kind, to prove we're right. But this is exactly when we make mistakes, saying things we shouldn't, making rash decisions, and instead of solving a problem, creating an even bigger one. Practicing non-reaction is a shield against this. It doesn't mean being passive or ignoring what's happening around us. It means taking full control over our responses. By choosing to pause before acting, we avoid emotional exhaustion, reduce conflicts, and make smarter decisions. The importance of mastering your reactions. Imagine this. A coworker makes a provocative comment. Your immediate instinct might be to fire back with sarcasm or respond in the same tone. But would that really help? The problem with reacting impulsively is that we give others power over our emotions. Every time someone gets under our skin, that person gains control over our mental state. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best way to defend yourself from an insult is to not become like the person who insulted you." If someone offends you and you respond with anger, you're only playing their game. But if you stay calm and choose not to react in the moment, you show self-control and maturity. Not only does this protect your peace, but it also disarms those who try to provoke you. Time as a filter for emotions. What feels unacceptable in the heat of the moment often becomes insignificant over time. Seneca once said, "Time is a great filter for emotions. Something that enrages you today might not even matter tomorrow." How many times have we regretted something we said in the heat of the moment? How many arguments could have been avoided if we had just waited a little before responding? Patience gives us a strategic advantage. When we take a moment before acting, we gain clarity and perspective. And many times, we realize that responding wasn't even necessary. How to apply non-reaction in everyday life. Life constantly gives us opportunities to practice non-reaction. A reckless driver cuts you off in traffic. You can honk, yell, and get stressed out. Or you can just take a deep breath and keep driving without letting it ruin your day. A family member insists on bringing up a topic that irritates you. You can respond with sarcasm and fuel a pointless argument. Or you can choose silence and avoid unnecessary conflict. At work, someone criticizes you unfairly. You can get defensive and escalate the tension. Or you can wait, reflect, and respond intelligently when you're calmer. Non-reaction isn't weakness, it's emotional intelligence. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to us that affects us, but how we interpret what happens. If we take a criticism as a personal attack, our instinct will be to react with anger. But if we choose to see it neutrally, we can evaluate whether there's anything useful in it and respond maturely, the strength of those who know how to wait. Most people act on impulse without thinking. When something upsets them, they react immediately, handing over control of their emotions to external forces. But real power lies in those who master this. Reaction. When you don't respond in the heat of the moment, when you give yourself time to think before acting, you show a level of control that few people have. This doesn't mean staying silent about everything. It simply means that your actions are guided by reason, not impulse. And when a response is truly necessary, it will be far more effective when delivered with calmness and clarity. What you gain by practicing non-reaction. Fewer unnecessary conflicts. Many arguments happen just because people react without thinking. When you avoid this cycle, your life becomes much more peaceful. Greater control over your emotions. You stop being a puppet of external triggers and start deciding how you feel and how you act. Better decision-making. Making decisions in the heat of the moment rarely leads to good outcomes. When you wait, your choices become wiser, respect, and admiration. People who stay calm in difficult situations are seen as strong and reliable. Your self-control earns respect, inner peace. When you stop letting small provocations affect you, your mind becomes lighter, and that reflects in your overall quality of life. The freedom to choose. How you respond. Non-reaction is powerful because it gives us freedom. When you feel the impulse to react and realize that you don't have to, a whole new world opens up. You realize you have a choice. You can let the emotion pass. You can observe the situation with detachment. You can consciously decide what to do. And when you do this, you discover something amazing. Conflicts decrease, anxiety fades, and the people who once provoked you lose all power over you. True strength isn't about winning arguments. It's about mastering your reactions. Not reacting in the heat of the moment isn't silence. It's waiting until your response is worthy of your intelligence. After all, your peace is worth more than any provocation. The hidden link between low self-esteem and anger. How to break the cycle. More often than not, the anger we feel doesn't come from external situations, but from the battles we fight within ourselves. when we're not at peace with who we are. Any comment, glance, or situation that challenges our self-image can trigger deep irritation. The issue isn't the situation itself, but what it stirs inside us. If someone criticizes us and we feel outraged, the real problem isn't the criticism, it's the weight we give it. If we were secure in who we are, if our self-esteem were strong, we would simply brush it off. But when confidence is fragile, even the smallest blow feels threatening. Insecurity makes us hypersensitive, causing us to react with anger whenever we feel our image is being questioned. Insecurity as a trigger for anger. Low self-esteem creates a constant sense of vulnerability. We feel like we're being judged all the time, as if we need to prove our worth every second. This puts us in a constant state of alert, where any criticism feels like a direct attack. When someone makes a negative comment, our mind doesn't process it rationally. Instead, it sees it as a threat, triggering our defense mechanism. Anger. Epictetus once said, "It's not what others say about us that affects us, but how we interpret their words." If we believe we're not good enough, any negative remark reinforces that belief, and our immediate reaction is anger. But if we have a solid self-image, other people's words lose their power over us. The secret isn't in silencing others but in strengthening our self-esteem, so their judgments no longer carry weight. The mirror of self-esteem, when anger reveals our fears. I remember a time when I had gained weight. Whenever someone commented on my appearance, I would get angry. I told myself I was mad at their lack of respect. But over time, I realized the problem wasn't them. It was me. I wasn't happy with what I saw in the mirror. Those comments only confirmed something I already felt deep inside, and that's what made me furious. My anger wasn't directed at others. It was fueled by my own insecurity. So instead of drowning in frustration, I decided to take action. I worked on my health, my discipline, and my mindset. And as my self-esteem grew stronger, those same comments that once bothered me no longer affected me, not because the world had changed, but because I had changed. How low self-esteem distorts reality. When we're insecure, we see the world through a distorted lens. We assume everyone is judging us, that every look is criticism, that every word carries a hidden attack. But the truth is, the problem isn't the outside world, it's the way we perceive it. Marcus Aurelius said, "If something external disturbs you, the issue is not the thing itself but your judgment of it." If someone makes an offensive comment and it deeply affects us, it's worth pausing to ask, why does this bother me so much? Deep down, am I afraid it might be true? Is the problem what was said, or how I feel about myself? Most of the time, the answer reveals something deeper. Our anger isn't directed at the person who spoke. It's a reflection of the insecurity we carry. How to break the cycle and regain control. The good news is that this pattern can be broken. When we strengthen our self-esteem, anger loses its grip on us. We become less reactive, more composed, and more focused on what truly matters. Here are some strategies to help you break free. Recognize your insecurities. The first step is awareness. Whenever you feel anger over a comment or situation, ask yourself, am I really mad at this person? Or is this touching on something I already feel about myself? Work on your self-image. The more you know and respect yourself, the less external opinions will matter. Invest in your personal growth, your physical and mental health, and your confidence. Practice non-reaction. Instead of reacting impulsively, take a deep breath and wait. Give your emotions time to settle before deciding if a response is even necessary. Rewrite your internal narrative. Replace self-destructive thoughts with empowering affirmations. Instead of thinking, "I'm not good enough," shift to "I am always growing and evolving." Understand that no one has power over you. Other people's opinions only impact you if you let them. When you build inner strength, external words become insignificant. True strength comes from self-knowledge. Ancient philosophers taught us that true strength doesn't come from forcing our will onto others, but from mastering ourselves. Anger is a sign that something within us remains unresolved, but instead of reacting impulsively, we can use it as a mirror to see what still needs to be strengthened. Every time you feel anger over something someone said, treat it as an opportunity. Ask yourself, am I giving too much power to this opinion? Does this really define who I am? What can I do to strengthen myself so I no longer need external validation? When you improve your self-esteem and take responsibility for your life, anger becomes unnecessary. There's no longer an insecurity to protect, no more fear to hide. Just the calm confidence of someone who knows themselves, accepts themselves, and no longer feels the need to react to things that don't define them. How living with purpose can transform your life. Living without purpose is like sailing through a stormy sea with no clear direction. When we don't know where we're headed, life starts to feel like an endless cycle of meaningless days. A void that slowly consumes us, disconnecting us from the things we do. We wake up each morning with no motivation, as if we're just going through the motions without a real reason. This lack of direction makes us irritable, reactive, and often incapable of handling even the smallest setbacks. Every obstacle feels insurmountable because we have nothing bigger to focus on. That sense of emptiness comes from not having a clear purpose. A mind without direction gets filled with noise, making it easy to get lost in emotions like frustration and resentment. The small annoyances of daily life feel overwhelming when we lack a guiding mission. When I found my purpose, everything changed. Before, I felt like life was just happening around me, like I had no control over anything. Everything irritated me. Every challenge seemed like an unbearable burden. But then, I made a choice. To focus on something that truly fulfilled me. My mission to create content and share ideas that could inspire and impact people's lives. Once I made that decision, the things that used to bother me started losing their grip on me. The frustration disappeared because my focus was on something bigger than my everyday problems. Purpose is a choice, not something you find living with. Purpose doesn't mean waiting for it to magically appear. It's a conscious decision to build a life that holds meaning for you. The philosopher Epictetus once said that we are responsible for defining who we want to be and what we want to contribute to the world. Purpose isn't something you find. It's something you choose. When you have a purpose, life stops feeling like a series of random events. It gains direction. You no longer react with anger to every inconvenience because you begin to see challenges as part of a bigger journey. Suddenly, everything that happens fits into a larger context, and you realize that even in difficult moments, there's a deeper meaning at play. Frustration fades, anger loses its grip, and you start to experience a greater sense of inner peace. Ask yourself, are you living with a clear purpose? Or are you just going through the days without a deeper meaning guiding your actions? When you find what truly drives you, what makes you wake up energized and ready to take on the day, anger loses its power over you. It dissolves in the face of something greater. Purpose puts everything into perspective. When you have a clear purpose, everything happening around you becomes background noise. What matters is what you're creating, the impact you're making, and that gives your life real meaning. So if life feels heavy, if frustration is taking over, maybe the issue isn't what's happening around you. Maybe it's the absence of a clear purpose. When you discover your purpose, challenges stop feeling like obstacles and start looking like stepping stones. Necessary steps on the path to something bigger. Find your purpose, and you'll see how it changes the way you view everything around you. Reprogram your mind. How to transform your automatic reactions. Believe it or not, your brain isn't stuck in a fixed way of reacting. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we can train our minds to respond differently to situations that once triggered our anger or frustration. The idea that we're wired a certain way and can't change is a myth. The brain is flexible, and like any muscle, it can be strengthened in specific areas based on how we train it. If you've developed a habit of reacting with anger every time something irritates you, you're actually reinforcing a neural pathway. That makes rage your automatic response. But what if you decided to change that? What if, instead of reacting with frustration, you started training your mind to respond with calm? While this shift won't happen overnight, over time, this new reaction will become second nature. Eventually, you'll realize that anger is no longer your default response. Peace is. I remember a moment when my dog destroyed something I really valued. Normally, I would have exploded, gotten angry, and yelled at him. But that day, I decided to do things differently. I took a deep breath, and instead of shouting, I gently petted my dog. At first, it felt like I was just suppressing my emotions. But in reality, I was teaching my brain that not every situation needs to be met with anger. I repeated this approach every time he did something that would have normally frustrated me. Over time, I noticed a shift. My reaction had changed. That internal pressure, that instinctive surge of anger, was gone because my brain had learned that these situations weren't threats. The anger was no longer necessary. Neuroplasticity. The key to emotional freedom. Neuroplasticity proves that we are not prisoners of our emotions. We can redirect our impulses and train ourselves to make calmness our automatic response. Each time we choose not to give in to anger, we reinforce neural pathways associated with patience and serenity, and the more we practice, the more natural it becomes. Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher, once said that while we cannot control what happens around us, we can always choose how we react. This isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a scientific fact. Our brains adapt based on what we repeatedly practice. If we consciously choose calmness over time, it becomes our default response. Making calm your new normal. It's important to understand that this transformation doesn't happen overnight. In the beginning, your mind will want to follow old anger patterns simply because they're familiar. But if you persist, if you make calmness a daily choice, eventually, your brain will accept this new response as the norm. Situations that once made you explode will no longer have the same power over you. Not because you're suppressing anger, but because your brain has learned that there's no real need for it. Anger is a habit, just like calmness. If we feed our anger, it grows and strengthens. But if we choose not to react impulsively and instead cultivate serenity, anger weakens until it fades. The key isn't to fake calmness or repress emotions, but to reprogram your mind to respond in a way that benefits you. If we want to be more balanced, peaceful individuals, we need to practice that every single day. And with time, we'll reach a point where calmness is no longer something we have to force. It simply becomes who we are. Love and gratitude, the forces that dissolve anger. Anger is a draining emotion. It eats away at our energy and often causes us to lose control of our own minds. But there's a powerful antidote to it: love and gratitude. When we're caught up in anger, our attention is locked on the negative, on what's bothering us, what feels unfair, what we think is wrong. We focus on lack, on frustration. But the moment we shift our focus to what we love and what we're grateful for, anger begins to lose its grip. Not because our problems magically vanish, but because we stop feeding anger the energy it needs to survive. Love has this incredible ability to reconnect us to what really matters. When we find ourselves in conflict with someone, we can ask a simple question: do I want to win this argument or preserve this relationship? When we truly love someone, the need to be right becomes less important. Anger, on the other hand, is selfish. It wants revenge. It wants to prove a point. Love wants to understand, to build, to unite. How many times have we reacted in anger over something small, only to regret it later? We often lash out without thinking and end up hurting the people we care about most. But if, in those tense moments, we pause and reconnect with the love we feel for that person, everything shifts. That single second of remembering what matters can change our entire response. Gratitude, too, is a powerful weapon against anger. You can't feel resentment and gratitude at the same time. They simply can't coexist. So next time you feel upset, try this. Think of 3 things you're grateful for in that moment. Maybe it's your health, someone's presence in your life, or even the opportunity to learn something from the situation. This simple shift in focus changes your mental state and gives you back control. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, reflected often on how fleeting life is. If today were your last day with someone you love, would it really be worth spending it angry at them? Gratitude reminds us that every moment counts. and anger just isn't worth it. A while back, I decided to run a little experiment on myself. Every time I felt angry or frustrated, instead of reacting the way I normally would, I'd force myself to think of something I was grateful for right then and there. At first, it felt unnatural, like I was pretending things were fine when they weren't. But over time, something shifted. My brain started to respond automatically. One day, someone spoke to me with a harsh, dismissive tone, and instead of getting mad, the first thought that came to mind was, I'm grateful for my health and for the ability to walk away from this. That simple thought helped me stay calm. I didn't feed the conflict, not because the other person deserved my peace, but because I did. Ancient philosophers already understood that our emotions aren't caused by what happens to us, but by how we choose to interpret it. When we dwell on unfairness or what bothers us, anger grows. But when we focus on what we love and what we're thankful for, anger fades. This isn't some mental trick. It's training your mind to see the world through a higher lens. Epictetus said that the secret to happiness isn't in having more, but in wanting less. When we practice gratitude, we realize that what we already have is enough. And when we know that, there's just no need to react in anger. Life is still good, even with its bumps. We can't avoid every moment of tension, and we can't control what others do. But we can decide which emotions we want to feed. If we choose love and gratitude, anger won't have any space to grow. When we love, we understand. When we're grateful, we let go. And when we practice both consistently, we become calmer, more grounded, and less reactive, not because the world changed, but because we did. Love and gratitude help us see challenges through a different lens, and that changes everything. Setting healthy boundaries, protecting your peace and well-being. When you don't set boundaries, you're allowing others to decide how they'll treat you. This doesn't mean being aggressive or pushing people away, but rather defining the limits of your patience, time, and energy. Without clear boundaries, you send the message that it's okay to be disrespected, interrupted constantly, or have your time devalued. And when that happens, frustration and anger start to build up, leading to emotional burnout. The responsibility of setting those boundaries, however, is yours. Only you can decide what you will accept and what you won't. Too often, we tolerate bad behavior because we're afraid of coming across as selfish or unpleasant. We struggle to say no because we fear the other person will get offended or reject us. The real problem isn't saying no. It's not saying it when it's needed. If someone constantly interrupts you at work, if a friend only reaches out when they need something, or if a family member criticizes you without reason, is it really your responsibility to accept that? Seneca said that we can't control how others behave, but we can control how we respond to them. If we let people treat us badly without reacting, we're giving them permission to keep doing it. When someone crosses a boundary and you don't stop them, you're reinforcing that behavior. If someone criticizes you unfairly and you say nothing, they'll assume it's okay to treat you that way. But when you calmly and firmly establish that you won't tolerate such behavior, you're sending a clear message. You value yourself enough to demand respect. You don't have to be aggressive or get into arguments. Just be clear. I don't accept that kind of comment. My time is valuable. Please respect that. I'm not comfortable with this. Simple phrases like these can completely transform the dynamic of a relationship. I remember a time when I allowed people to interrupt me all the time. No matter what I was doing, if someone wanted my attention, I dropped everything to attend to them. At first, I thought it made me a good person, but over time, I realized I was putting everyone else's needs above my own. I felt frustrated and exhausted, but the guilt wasn't theirs, it was mine for never setting a boundary. So, one day, I decided to change. When someone interrupted me, I simply said, "I'm busy right now. Can we talk later?" At first, it was hard, but little by little, people understood that my time mattered too. And surprisingly, I didn't lose any important relationships. In fact, I began to feel more respected. The ancients knew that setting boundaries isn't about rejection, it's about self-respect. Epictetus said we must decide what is in our control and what is not. We can't stop others from crossing our boundaries, but we can choose how to respond. If you silently allow someone to treat you badly every time, you're not being virtuous. You're abandoning your responsibility to protect your well-being. Saying no is an act of courage, not because it's easy, but because it shows you know and respect yourself. Setting healthy boundaries means creating balanced relationships where both parties know what to expect and what is acceptable. Often, people don't even realize they've crossed a boundary until someone tells them. We can't expect others to read our minds. We need to communicate it. And if even after you've communicated your boundaries, respect still isn't maintained, then you need to ask yourself whether that person should continue to be in your life. Every time you choose not to set a boundary out of fear of conflict, you're choosing internal conflict over external conflict. You're choosing your own dissatisfaction just to avoid a difficult conversation. But avoiding the problem doesn't solve it. Learning to say no without guilt is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, not because it makes you stronger in front of others, but because it makes you stronger within yourself. Setting boundaries isn't about controlling others. It's about protecting your peace and living with dignity. Not everything deserves your attention. Focusing on what matters. Every day we're faced with provocations, unnecessary comments, and small problems that try to pull us into chaos. But the truth is, most of these things don't really matter. We waste our emotional energy reacting to the trivial, to things that will be irrelevant tomorrow. We live in a world where everyone has an opinion, where criticism is constant, and even minor issues can seem huge if we don't know how to filter out what truly matters. The key to maintaining mental peace is understanding that not everything happening around us deserves our energy. Every time something bothers you, take a moment and ask yourself, will this really matter a month from now? A year from now? Will I even remember this? Most of the time, the answer will be no. And yet, we still get caught up in the emotion of the moment, in the need to defend ourselves or react. But when we step back and look at things from a broader perspective, we realize that many of them are just distractions. Marcus Aurelius said that tranquility comes when we learn to ignore what doesn't concern us. If someone insults you on the street, does it really change anything in your life? If a stranger criticizes you on social media, does it affect who you are? Provocations and criticism only pull us away from what truly matters. Imagine someone makes a rude comment about you. The immediate impulse is to respond, defend yourself, prove you're right. But what do you really gain from that? Is it worth investing your energy in such a discussion? A comment doesn't define your worth. A criticism doesn't change who you are. If you react every time someone says something negative about you, you're handing your peace over to anyone who decides to provoke you. Epictetus taught us not to be slaves to other people's opinions. If something doesn't contribute to your growth, if it doesn't change the course of your life, then it doesn't deserve your attention. Most of the worries we carry aren't even ours. We stress over what others think, over problems we can't control, over expectations that don't even belong to us. We spend too much time worrying about what people will say, seeking approval, and getting caught up in situations that don't affect our true essence. When we understand that our energy is limited, we start being more selective about what we give our attention to. This doesn't mean being indifferent, but learning to distinguish what truly deserves our effort from what's just noise. I remember a time when any criticism affected me. If someone questioned what I was doing, I felt the need to explain myself, to justify, to prove I was right. Over time, I realized that this was a waste of energy. I learned to observe before reacting and to ask myself if it was really worth it. Most of the time, the best response was silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because it simply wasn't necessary. Not everything requires a response. Not everything deserves a conflict. Not everything deserves your attention. Every time you choose to ignore what isn't relevant, you're protecting your mental peace and training your mind to focus on what truly matters, on what truly transforms. The great philosophers didn't seek to control the world, but to control their response to it. If someone acts with malice, if they try to provoke you, remember, you have the option not to respond. True strength isn't in winning every battle, but in choosing the ones that are truly worth fighting for. When you start filtering out what really matters, you'll notice that many of your concerns simply disappear. The time you once wasted in pointless arguments can now be used to build, learn, and improve. You can't stop people from criticizing you. You can't control what others say or do, but you can decide if it's worth letting it affect your mental state. In the end, true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, but not being dominated by what doesn't matter. The importance of separating facts from beliefs. Often, we don't suffer because of what actually happens, but because of what we believe those events mean. We live trapped in interpretations, in stories we tell ourselves about who we are and who others are. The truth is, most of these stories aren't facts. They're beliefs we've accepted without questioning, and these beliefs can be the biggest obstacles to our mental peace. The great philosophers taught us that the key to tranquility is learning to differentiate what's a fact from what's simply our perception of it. When we fail to make that distinction, we get caught up in unnecessary emotions, reacting with anger, sadness, or fear, not realizing that we're reacting to something that's not even real. If someone calls us useless, it's not the comment itself that hurts. It's our choice to believe it. The objective fact is that someone said some words, but our minds transform those words into an absolute truth. What if they're right? What if I really am like that? Suddenly, a simple opinion becomes a weight we carry for years. We don't stop to question if it's true. We just absorb it. Epictetus warned us about this. He said that it's not the events themselves that affect us, but the interpretation we make of them. If someone criticizes us, we can see it as an opportunity to improve or as a personal attack. The difference between these two responses doesn't lie in the facts, but in our beliefs. Humans are experts at creating stories. We tell ourselves that we're not good enough, that we don't deserve certain things, that we'll never be able to change. And the worst part is, we believe these stories as if they were unquestionable facts. But where do these beliefs actually come from? Often they come from past experiences, from words we've heard, from mistakes we've made that we've turned into permanent labels. If we fail at something, we tell ourselves, I'm a failure. If someone rejects us, we think, I'm unworthy of love. But none of these thoughts are facts. They're just interpretations, beliefs we reinforce over time without realizing that we can change them. I remember a time when I believed I wasn't smart enough to achieve certain things, not because there was proof of it, but because at some point in my life, someone made me feel that way, and I accepted it as truth. Every time I faced a challenge, that belief would resurface. You can't do it. You're not capable. But one day, I decided to question it. Where was the real evidence that I was incapable? Hadn't I learned so many things in life? Hadn't I overcome challenges before? I realized that this belief wasn't a fact. It was just a story I was telling myself. And by understanding that, I began to let it go. It wasn't immediate, but with every thought I challenged, I regained a little more control. The great philosophers practiced mental self-discipline. They trained themselves to examine their thoughts and filter out what truly deserved attention. They didn't accept any emotion or idea without first analyzing it. Marcus Aurelius advised us to ask, in the face of any negative thought, is this true? Is it really as terrible as I think? Most of the time, the answer was, no. We're not as limited as we think. We're not the labels others put on us. We don't have to be slaves to beliefs that hold us back from growing. But to free ourselves from them, we first need to recognize that they're not absolute facts. Every time you feel a belief limiting you, question it. Ask yourself if it's really true, or if you accepted it without proof. If you can replace it with a more realistic version, you'll have taken a huge step toward emotional freedom. Separating facts from beliefs is the way to stop being a prisoner of your own mind. It's how you regain control, stop reacting automatically, and start living with clarity. When we learn to see reality without the distortions of our beliefs, we find the peace that's always been there, waiting to be discovered. Developing a healthy self-image. Your self-image shouldn't depend on other people's opinions. If you live through the eyes of the world, you'll always be a prisoner to seeking approval. One day, A compliment can make you feel invincible. The next, a criticism can make you crumble. This instability arises when we build our sense of worth on external factors, things we can't control. But when our perception of who we are is grounded in self-awareness and acceptance, no one can steal our peace. The great philosophers taught us that true strength comes from looking inward, from defining who we are without waiting for external validation. Only when we stop depending on what others think can we truly live with freedom. The problem arises when our self-image is shaped by imposed beliefs. From a young age, we absorb opinions, labels, and judgments without questioning them. If someone says we're shy, we accept it. If they call us failures, we believe it. But how much of that is actually true? How much of our identity was built on ideas we never questioned? Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we should always ask ourselves whether what we believe about ourselves is true or just a story we've told ourselves. The key lies in self-awareness, observing ourselves without filters, illusions, or self-deception. Accepting both our strengths and flaws, not to settle, but to be honest with ourselves. If someone criticizes you, the automatic reaction might be to defend yourself, get hurt, or try to prove the opposite. But what if, instead, you paused and reflected? If someone says you're selfish, instead of reacting with anger, you could ask, "Is that true?" If the answer is yes, then you have an opportunity to improve. If the answer is no, then the criticism loses its weight, and you can let it go without letting it affect you. Epictetus taught us not to worry about what others say about us, but about what is true. It's not the criticism itself that hurts us, it's how we interpret it. If your self-image is solid, other people's words lose their power. For years, I worried too much about how others saw me. I tried to fit in, be accepted, meet external expectations. But that pulled me away from who I really was. I made decisions based on what I thought I needed to do to be approved, not on what I truly wanted. It felt like a constant struggle because it was never enough. There was always someone with a different opinion, something else to change to please someone else. It wasn't until I realized that I couldn't control what others thought of me that everything changed. I stopped trying to fit in and started asking myself, who am I really? What do I want for myself? And it was through this process that the need for approval disappeared. It's not about settling. It doesn't mean giving up on growth. It simply means recognizing your worth without relying on external factors. When you accept who you are, with your strengths and weaknesses, your wins and mistakes, you free yourself from the fear of judgment. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to show your value because you already have it. The most powerful part is that when you stop seeking approval, you become more authentic. The people who truly matter will respect you for who you are, not for who you try to be. True emotional freedom comes when you stop living for others and start living for your own truth. This doesn't mean ignoring all external opinions, but learning to filter what really deserves your attention and what doesn't. When you know yourself, when you have clarity about your values and purpose, criticism stops being a threat. You live with confidence and peace, without the need to impress anyone. Not because you're perfect, but because you no longer need the world to validate your existence. And in that state of clarity, you find the peace that's always been within you. The fallacy of good and bad. No one is completely good or completely bad. We're all a mix of right and wrong, moments of clarity and weakness. Yet, our human minds tend to simplify things and label people as good or bad, based on our own experiences or what suits us. This way of thinking is a fallacy, a distortion of reality that stops us from understanding the complexity of human beings. When we see someone only through a label, we fail to see who they truly are. A person's actions can be both just and unjust, generous or selfish, but reducing them to one category prevents us from fully understanding them. The individual who acts with cruelty today could be the same person showing compassion tomorrow. The man who's made mistakes can also do good. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we should see others for what they truly are, fallible human beings, shaped by their stories, fears, and experiences. No one is just one thing. No one is entirely defined by their best or worst moments. When we can grasp this, we free ourselves from judgment and the emotional weight it brings. When someone treats us poorly, our instinct is to label them as bad, to think they're unjust, cruel, or deserving of punishment. But have you ever stopped to ask what led them to act that way? Not to justify their behavior, but to understand that no one is born bad. We're all the result of our experiences and choices. Epictetus taught us not to judge people solely by their actions, but to remember that everyone acts according to their level of knowledge and understanding. If someone is disrespectful, maybe they've never learned another way to relate. If someone betrays, perhaps they've lived in fear their whole life. This doesn't mean accepting wrongdoing, but recognizing that it's not always personal. Often people act out of internal confusion, not from a conscious desire to hurt. In society, people react according to their environment and circumstances. One person might be kind to their family and ruthless in business. They could be generous with friends and cold with strangers. But these contradictions don't mean they're a bad person, just that they're human. We've all acted in ways we're not proud of at some point. We've all made mistakes, said things that hurt, or made impulsive decisions. If we judge others harshly, we should apply the same standard to ourselves. And if we want to be understood for our moments of weakness, why not offer the same understanding to others? When we stop labeling people as good or bad, our relationships become more balanced. We no longer react with frustration to others' failures because we understand that everyone is on their own learning journey. We become more patient and grounded. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or accepting injustice, but learning to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with anger. Marcus Aurelius said that when someone behaves badly, we should ask ourselves, did I really expect this person to be different? People act based on what they know, according to what their minds allow them to perceive. If we expect perfection from others, we'll constantly be disappointed. When we free ourselves from this mindset, we find inner peace. We no longer feel the need to punish, react with resentment, or divide the world into allies and enemies. We become more objective, calm, and able to handle conflicts with clarity. True strength doesn't lie in judging others harshly, but in understanding that we're all on the same path, just at different stages of the journey. We're all here to learn and grow, and when we understand that, we stop draining ourselves with others and focus on the one thing we can truly control, our own evolution. Recognize, investigate, and nurture anger is a powerful emotion, but it doesn't have to control your life. It can feel like an uncontrollable fire that consumes you in the moment, but if you learn to manage it wisely, it can become a tool for growth rather than an agent of destruction. The method of recognize, investigate, and nurture, Orion, is an effective technique for dealing with anger without suppressing it or acting impulsively. It's a process based on mindfulness and self-reflection, something the ancients practiced intuitively, even before giving it a name. With Rin, we can observe our anger without being swept away by it. The first step is to recognize the anger. Don't deny or repress the emotion, but acknowledge that it's present. Often when we get angry, we react automatically, as if we're on autopilot, letting ourselves be carried away by the emotion, without even realizing what's really happening inside. If, in the moment when anger arises, you stop and say to yourself, "I'm feeling angry right now," you create a separation between yourself and the emotion. Marcus Aurelius emphasized the importance of observing our emotions as external phenomena without fully identifying with them. When you can see anger as something temporary, a reaction that arises but doesn't define who you are, you've already taken the first step toward controlling it. The second step is to investigate the source of your anger. Instead of getting stuck in the surface-level feeling of anger, ask yourself, where is this really coming from? Often, anger is just a symptom of something deeper. It could be fear, insecurity, unmet expectations, or past wounds that haven't healed yet. Epictetus taught us that it's not the external events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. If someone interrupts you during a conversation and it irritates you, maybe it's not just the interruption that bothers you, but a deeper belief that you're not being respected or valued. By getting to the root of the issue, anger loses its power because you realize that what you're feeling has more to do with you than the external situation. The third step is to nurture the part of yourself that needs healing. Instead of punishing yourself for feeling angry, practice self-compassion. This doesn't mean justifying your behavior, but recognizing that there's a part of you that needs care. Maybe you've repressed certain emotions or developed limiting beliefs that make you react a certain way. Or perhaps you just need to give yourself more space to process what you're feeling. Marcus Aurelius said we should treat ourselves with the same patience and understanding we offer others. We can't eliminate anger entirely, but we can learn to respond with wisdom, not impulsivity. As you practice this process, you'll notice that anger loses its power over you. This doesn't mean you'll never get angry again, but when it does happen, you'll know exactly how to handle it without letting it destroy your peace or affect your relationships. You'll learn that anger is just a passing emotion, not a command to act without thinking. Instead of reacting impulsively, you'll respond with reflection. And in that space of awareness, you'll find true emotional freedom. Final message. I sincerely hope this message has been helpful. Congratulations on making it this far and finishing the video. That means you're seeking personal growth and development. If you enjoyed the content, give it a like and leave a comment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings we can apply to our daily lives. So I encourage you to keep exploring this philosophy and everything it has to offer for your life.